Hi, this is the first of two videos. This first part, I'm going to deal with what my duties were as brakeman in the railroad yard at Roebling, New Jersey, when I worked for Colorado Fuel and Iron, John A. Roebling's and Sons Division. As a brakeman in the railroad yard, what that actually meant was that you rode along on a small wooden step on the front of a switch engine or on the back of it, or sometimes on the gondolas or cars, to get off at certain points to direct the train onto side tracks and so forth. Of course, you had to throw a switch, great big steel switch, in order to do that. And that was a very important job in respect to the fact that you were responsible for correctly directing the train onto side tracks and spurs and so forth, and played an important part in making up a train for the scrapyard, for the melt section, or just the general yard. In other words, as I recall, about 4 places that you could work as part of the railroad yard. There was the general yard, which covered the entire factory, and you had many places to stop to pick up stuff and make up trains and pull them out to where the main railroad lines would pick up the empty gondolas and so forth and take them back to wherever they go to be filled up. And then there was the scrap yard, where the scrap was loaded onto gondolas, and then you would pull the scrap cars, full scrap cars out, and then push them down and position them next to the electric furnaces, where a big magnet would be on the end of a cable, an overhead crane type device, and the scrap metal then would be taken out of the gondolas and dropped into the pots, and then the electrodes would then be would come in contact with them once the lid was put on. These were huge steel pots, melt pots, and lined with melt pots, and they had like a lid that kind of swiveled over and then clamped down, and then the electrodes would be lowered through the lid and make contact with the metal. There's 3 electrodes, and that's what would actually melt it down. Another place you would work is in the tail hole, or the melt section, and your job there was to direct the train and make sure that it got into the right place to pick up to position the empty molds and remove the ones that had just been poured, and get them over to the stripper, what they called the stripper, where the ingots, once they cooled enough, would be removed from the molds. And then you'd take the empty molds out and get them ready to be filled again. Take them to another place for that, and the steel ingots would be positioned in the yard in such a way as to make them up to push into the soaking pits. And I'll get into that process in the next video. But another place would be supporting the crane operator, which was a railroad-mounted diesel-powered engine with a crane on it. And what you do is you go into one part of the mill where cropped billets had been dropped into a hole, and then the crane had like a powered magnet on the end of the cables, and then drop it down inside there, and you pick up these billets and then put them in cars. And of course, your job as a brakeman is to make sure that the cars are hooked up to the engine properly, and that you are able to throw the switches the way they're supposed to be, so that you can get the car in position. Throw the switch again once the engine backs up, so that it can position itself to pick up the ingots, or the billets that are in the bottom of this holding bin, sort of. It was a very dangerous job, the whole place. I mean, you could get yourself killed very easily if you weren't careful. We did have protective equipment. We had steel-toed shoes. A lot of guys didn't like to wear them, so they paid the price for that sometimes. You had a hard hat. You had some very thick gloves to wear. And you were supposed to wear a face mask to filter out the air that was full of steel dust, asbestos, and ceramic dust. And I'll go into that too in the next video, what that ceramic was for. So it was dirty, dangerous. Could get sick from it. A lot of guys did. Those that worked there for 20 or 30 years, I don't think lived a full life. But then again, hey, who does sometimes? You know, you can die for any reason. But I think it was a very interesting job anyway. And I got to look at a part of the steel industry that very few people know anything about. And I still remember the process. So that's the end of this video. The next one will be dealing with the process of what I did in the as far as the part I played in the manufacture of steel. And I think I played a very important part. I had a great deal of job satisfaction in this because I was a learner conductor. I never did qualify as full conductor, but I did get to learner conductor, and I got to know that one part of the mill like the back of my hand, and was very proud of it. Still am. So I'll be back in a few minutes to make that one, and then you'll know a little bit more about me.